And you mentioned that a job brought you here. So what was the opportunity that brought you to the States?
Yeah, and it definitely is the States, I think, because Dallas is more my husband's muse. He's like obsessed with the Texan way, and he
Oh,
loves Dallas in particular. And I mean, it's a hot spot for real estate for sure. So I think that's what brings us to Dallas specifically. But um, I was in a startup accelerator in 2021. It was in Zurich, but then it was in San Francisco as well, virtually.
okay.
Um,
What was the
and
accelerator?
so for startups, like from ideation all the way to launching your product and getting clients and moving through a whole acceleration, yeah, from ideation to product. So that company, I had the decision to start another Canadian company, start a Swiss company, or an American one. And in terms of investors and building it, it just made sense to start in the States. So that's sort of, it was just it was sort of a strategic decision, but then led to, hey, why don't we move here and work here? And oh, we like Dallas. Okay. So
So
yeah, adventure.
what exactly is Chiefly? Give the audience a little bit of background. Like, what exactly is this product and where did the idea come from?
Yeah. So Chiefly is a software e-com company. We're building a solution that goes on top of Zoom to help make meetings more effective. So we use machine learning to assess keywords in a conversation, facial expressions, emotions from the tone of your voice, and we give insights in meetings about everyone in the call.
Where did that idea come from? Too much time
Yeah.
on Zoom during COVID? You were like, we need they need to recognize facial expressions. I am facial expressions, so this will recognize a lot of me. But on a serious note, where did the idea come from?
Yeah. So before that, I had spent from 2016, I got my coaching certification. I'd been coaching people one-on-one in groups, and I realized, hey, there's sort of a formula to this, and there's a formula to what makes an effective coaching conversation. And when I started bringing coaches onto my team, I realized that we needed a rubric or a way to make coaching sort of graded or more effective to see, okay, are these conversations going well? And unless you want to watch thousands of hours of footage, which is a lot of work, machine learning and AI really helps you to kind of go through all of that data and gather insights. So it was sort of, hey, I have all these coaching calls that I need to evaluate.
Mhm.
How am I going to evaluate them without watching them all? And so it kind of spun off from just being about coaching calls to any meeting, really, and seeing what the tone of the call was, what key concepts and themes were important, to get a sense of how the meeting went. And yeah, I think during COVID, it also exacerbated that, because you have so many meetings, a lot of them inefficient as well. And it's like, okay, which calls are really necessary? How is your team also doing? So getting a pulse on, okay, if you have one-on-ones or group weekly calls, how are those going? Are people stressed out? What's the sentiment? So it adds to that as well. So I think it sort of started from a coaching angle because that's what the world I'm in, but really transformed into any meeting, any context.
What are 2 to 3 things that makes an efficient call from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think starting with the context. So we have different elements that you can decide, okay, is this a coaching call? Is this a performance meeting? Is this a presentation? So everybody being really clear about why we're here, I think, is super important to making something effective, because if you don't have that lined out, how could you possibly reach the end result if you don't know where you're going? So that's really important. And then I think all of those intangibles, a lot of specifically managers have their agenda of what they need to share, very focused on the business, but they're not paying attention to those subtle details of, are your people stressed? Who's checked out and not engaging in the meeting and doing 10 other things and multitasking? Are people finding other things important than you? So are you talking about certain themes, but people are bringing up unrelated questions? So just, I think having a why, and then really keeping a pulse, an emotional pulse on your people, I think makes for a good meeting, even one-on-one, right? We need to feed off of each other in this dynamic too.
Yeah.
Like, are we on the same page? Am I making sense? You're clarifying. So it's also this exploration, and I think really being in tune with who's on the other side of the table. Those two things really matter.
Coaching was the space that I was in before I got laid off, and I absolutely loved it. For those who are new to the overall concept of coaching, what exactly is coaching?
It's a good question. I think anybody you ask will give you a really different definition, but I'm trained in solution focused coaching. So we're really focused on, okay, where are you today? Where do you want to go? And let's vision and figure out, okay, what are the steps to get you there? And then a coach is somebody that's walking with you toward that point B. So that's what I've been trained in. We're not focused on the past. We're not therapists in that sense. We're not mentors or advisors, consultants. So we're not telling you what to do, which a lot of people show up saying, I want to be more confident, help. I think that's more for trainings or maybe listening to a podcast like this. So coaching is really about asking powerful questions to help you gain clarity on your journey toward whatever it is that you want. And you have different coaches specialized in helping you get to different point Bs.
What's the biggest mistake that people make along the way from A to B?
Biggest mistake.
In terms of maybe when they come into a coaching session, they think, I heard this from a lot of CEOs, like, I want you to tell me how to get A to B. And they wanted a very direct, clear line of sight, which to your point, it's a lot of questions. It's not necessarily me telling you what to do. It's understanding who you are and why you want those things and then coming up with a plan. So when I mean like A to B, like, yeah, what's one of the biggest mistakes that you see a lot of your clients make when they have this vision of A to B? Maybe it's in the direction, or I just want to get your candid thoughts.
Yeah. I think in corporate, especially as people are developing, or even if they are CEOs, I think the biggest mistake is actually doubting your own resources, doubting yourself. I think people come to coaching looking for an external answer often, or feeling uncertain. And I think you could not necessarily avoid having to have the coaching call, but if you come in having prepared a little bit about your own intuitions and thoughts, I think you can get a lot out of a session by, hey, here's my point A, here's my point B, here's what I'm thinking, and I want to clarify it further. People come in going, I don't know. It's like you never have zero idea. So I think the biggest mistake is showing up completely unprepared, knowing what you want, but kind of never having thought about what are those steps or visioning about it. So of course you can show up to a call just out of the blue and we can work through that. But I think if people showed up and really were intentional about here's what I want and here's what I think about that and had a bit of preamble almost, it would really help to make sessions more effective.
What was your why for getting into the coaching business?
Another really good question. I think I was always drawn to helping people and even myself get out of destructive thinking patterns and things that weren't serving me in terms of how I approach like any thought process that is ineffective for myself or others, or getting stuck in these kind of patterns of, let's say, dating the same person or having the same meaningless job. I really wanted to help people get unstuck out of that, and myself out of things that I found myself stuck in. And so I explored therapy and being a therapist, and it was just, I felt that most modalities, I can't speak for all therapists, but it wasn't that point A, point B, let's get resourceful and map this out. It wasn't as structured. But like going to therapy, even in my own personal experience, was a lot of rehashing past really difficult experiences, leaving really sad, sort of relieved, but not having concrete tools to do anything about it or be moving somewhere in a different direction. It felt like I was really rehashing bad feelings a lot, at least my experience. So I just Googled around and thought, okay, there's got to be a better way to go about helping people than this approach. And I landed on solution-focused coaching and went for the certification and started coaching people, started having conversations.
You mentioned something to me before we got on here that you encourage people and want to inspire people to follow that voice inside of them, to chase something and create something that's bigger than life. And it's funny that you said that. And I immediately told her, for all of you, obviously we're not on this, but I was like, stop talking. We need to get on the microphone because there's a song and it's called Bigger Than. And it always repeats in my mind. Like I've always had this dream to create something that's so much bigger than myself. So it's funny when I meet people like yourself that resonate so much with that. And that's part of your why. Where did that mindset stem from within you?
I think a lot of tendency toward perfectionism and self-censoring and feeling like I had to be this good girl. I think that was kind of how I grew up, that I needed to follow the rules and be good in school. And a lot of being good in school is following the rules.
Yeah.
And I really started questioning that. It just didn't feel right, especially in high school. I was very involved in everything. I was definitely always been this kind of overachiever personality. And I just the things that I was pursuing in school were not aligned with the things that my inner voice was saying I wanted. And so I think that's sort of where it was like, wait, I keep having this want to sing more or, speak in front of audiences and be in a public dialogue. And I'm really interested in developing myself and how people think. But okay, I'm in business school learning about finances and accounting, and that doesn't. So it was this kind of clarifying process of, okay, I have abandoned what the voice in my head. I've abandoned what the voice in my head says so much that I didn't want that anymore for myself. And I started seeing how much everyone does that themselves too, on social media, in real life, in relationships with themselves. Sometimes, like I said about coaching, they'll come to a session, I don't even know what I want. It's like, that's heartbreaking to me.
Yeah.
Because we all have these little whispers of things that we want, and they seem too unrealistic. They're too scary. They're too much money. I don't have enough experience. I don't have the time to do that. I have a job. I can't have this. Like, we just start explaining away these things that we really want. And I really think that's heartbreaking, because we have one shot here, I mean, in this body, in this life, like you've got today and you don't have a guarantee about tomorrow. And so it's like, go for it, because the worst case is what? You don't like it? It doesn't work the way you thought? You go a different way? Like the worst case is never as bad as feeling regret when you didn't take a shot. So yeah, that's why.
I love that. This episode was made for me. I'm over here about to cry. How do you close the gap between what your heart and because you're literally speaking to me, like what your heart and what your intuition wants versus what society as a whole is telling you? Because from my personal experience, it's like what your family and your friends and everyone else around you thinks that you should be doing is very different from the voice inside of you. There's someone out there listening to this. This is what my entire podcast is about. How can you close the gap between the two and tune more into that voice inside of you?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest challenge of our times with technology. How do you do that? You find a way to be alone, completely silencing that outside world so that you give a moment to those thoughts, those feelings to actually bubble up to the surface. And so you give them attention, you give them solitude. And I think that that's scary, because then if you hear the voice, it's very hard to go back.
Yeah.
I think when you hear, no, like, this is what I really want, very, very difficult to kind of push that down when you don't want to be in the relationship anymore. You don't want to be in the job, the friendship, the whatever it is, like it's not working, and you have to admit that to yourself. And that's why we avoid it. We avoid it because it's easier to stay comfortable. It's easier to be safe. It's easier to listen to what someone else thinks is best and then blame them when it's not working. It's easier. So I think the way to do it is to really give yourself regularly, I mean, daily, ideally, but time alone, no phone, nobody else to influence you, to really listen.
Was there a time or event in your life where you turned inward and listened to that voice, and now you're looking back? You obviously have a few different businesses. We're going to talk a little bit about your book, that now looking back, it came from that moment, one of these creations or something in your life.
Yeah, 100%. I think I've been forced to explore it, which is why now it's so clear to me. But definitely I was going and kicking and screaming to this idea of solitude and going to be by myself. That's very hard for me. I'd much rather be in a group setting with people. So definitely went in kicking and screaming. I had a car accident in January of 2019 that left me with a traumatic brain injury. So I had a very severe concussion and essentially was in a dark room, which, by the way, is not the best advice, but that's what the emergency room told me to do. But so I was really alone in this room with really bad migraines, light sensitivity for months. I mean, it was January until August. I was in rehab. Every day I was at chirophysio. I talk about it in the book a bit. Because that definitely was a moment where it was like, hang on, I'd been traveling a lot. I had just launched the pre-sale of the book in November before it happened. So, and the I mean, there's so much more to say about the book, but I think I was driven by ego around the book. If you're a coach, if you're an entrepreneur, you have to have a book. You have to,
Yeah.
like, that's just what you're supposed to do. And that's really where I thought, okay, I should write a book. And then I had this car accident that forced me to sit by myself with no screens, nobody. That definitely got me to this place of, hey, wait, there's a voice in here that knows what you want and what you need. And you've been completely ignoring it for most of your life. So definitely the car accident kind of made me go, whoa, there's so much inside of me. I do know what I want. I do know what's important. I do know what I think.
Yeah.
I don't need anyone else to tell me. I've been giving this huge source of power to other people my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to live with the consequences. They don't have to deal with the ramifications of any of my choices, even and if they don't like them and they judge them, which they do no matter what you do. So like,
Say that louder.
like there's no, does not matter. Like I just think about even familial expectations, be in a relationship, get married, have kids, get a bigger house, better house, more kids. Like there's always more to do in life and people are going to tell you that you're doing it wrong no matter what. So it's like that as a guiding North Star is just not it because you'll never get it right depending on who you talk to. So definitely the car accident just slowed me down enough to hear that.
Thank you for sharing that. I loved that you shared that. And it's funny, I've shared this before, like my mom got in a bad car accident and Spider asked me this question on one of my episodes. It's like, what was and that was the biggest thing that transformed. And I think the biggest lesson that I learned was my value and relationship with time. What was the biggest lesson that unfortunate event taught you about yourself and your perspective on life?
Yeah, definitely the time component that there is no guarantee. We really don't know how much time we have. And in the book, I do sort of talk through, okay, an average career, you get about 100,000 hours. So be mindful. But even that's not that much when you start to break it down. So even if you have this great, long 80-year life, even that is finite and you don't know how much of that you'll get or what it'll be like. It's just there's so much uncertainty. We have so little control. So the present moment is really where it's at in terms of managing what we're doing or making the best use of. I think it's today, it's right now. And that definitely gave me a sense of urgency too around no guarantees around time. Even the time I do have, if I get this long, great life, is not that long.
Mm-mm.
So I better get to it today.
You mentioned something that is so important and I think is huge for people to take away from this episode. You recognize that the book was stemming from ego. Elaborate a little bit more on the audience of how you knew that was stemming from ego and not from your intuition or an inner calling, because we oftentimes switch the two until you're silent. So elaborate more on that experience.
Yeah, I think it's sort of those two paths of inner world versus outer world. Like it's asking if you do feel it's your intuition, asking yourself why a bunch of times always works. But also, if nobody saw this, would I still do it? And so, of course, a huge thing that has been motivating me lately is to deliver value to who reads it. So that is an external way to impact others. So being driven by serving people or giving to others, I think is noble. But I think the distinction first between ego and inner calling is if nobody saw this, would I still create it? Would I still do it? Would I still engage? And then, if it is something you're making for the outer world, then sure, focus on being of value, being of service. That's kind of the next step once you've decided it's something you want to do. But if it's, no, I'm just doing it to hold this book in my hand and take a picture and be an author versus, no, I would write this just for me as like an exercise. And this book really is my whole heart and soul in a book because it took so many years to clarify. I think that's the first step is why am I doing this for me or is it for everyone else? And then if you're going to gain from it, then you can focus on, okay, how do I deliver the most value for other people? But if it's starting from a place of it's just for other people or it's just for my image, I don't think that's going to be truly meaningful and fulfilling for you, which is why that's the starting point, doing things to be fulfilling for yourself. Then, of course, as you give, you're impacting others, but the feeling and the impact is going to be so much greater if you're giving from a place of, I love doing this. I'm here just because I want to serve in this way. I do this, even I would make these cakes even if no one ate them. That's different from, I have to make 100 cakes, you know what I mean? Like it's, so I had to really reckon with myself and say, even if no one reads or buys this book, is it worth the time spent writing it? Do I want to write it? What do I need to get out on the page and say? So I'd say that's a distinction.
From your background in coaching, say there's someone that wants to, they feel this inner calling, but they don't know what that is or what that means. What's one thing that you would advise them to do to open up the floodgates, if you will, to pursuing down that path?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, even what we think we want isn't always necessarily where we go, I think even in writing a book, I thought my point B was something, but along the transformative journey of writing it, I've ended up somewhere completely different. So I think even if you think you're completely clear on your point B, or you have no idea what the point B is, I think coming back to the idea of being present and really taking things one step at a time is where you walk toward the desired feeling, the desired vision, the desired result is in being incredibly mindful in the day-to-day of, am I doing this because I feel called to do this, or am I doing this out of obligation or for, the image or for others? So it's the discernment of day-to-day walking toward what you feel called to. And if you don't know what the end result or what it looks like, or, okay, I'm just interested in, writing. I don't know if it's a book or a poem, or I want this podcast, but maybe it ends up being like a TV show, or maybe it ends up being a movie, or a series. Like they're just the end result. Yes, it's good to be clear on, but often even with an end result, I think we move, it ends up being so different from what you initially envisioned that if you're unclear, that's totally okay. The clarifying point is today, and what's my next step? One step at a time. Especially, I'm so prone to just having big ideas and getting super overwhelmed with all the steps to get there. Same thing. It's like, okay, what's my next step? Only the very next step. Okay, I'm interested in this thing. Okay, let me just spend some time Googling around. Let me talk to somebody that's in the same space. Let me journal about it. Let me talk to a friend about it just to bounce ideas. Let me get alone and be quiet and listen more in that solitude. So just that very next thing, I think, makes it so much more manageable and clarifying, and you're not biting off more than you can chew, which, hey, again, the best laid plans still have a way of just working out differently than you imagined. So, and it gives you the flexibility too, I think, to be adaptable to that, which is a big part of my book too.
I think sometimes we have something that we envision, and you hit on something that's very important, that it turns out to be very different. And I always hear people say that it's far better. And I think obviously we're going to get to your book, but it's one example of a million of how you had this thing for a few years ago before a huge event. And now I'm sure the book has transformed in a lot of different ways. How do you advise people on not looking at that changed plan as a failure and just as a redirection, if you will, in the long term?
I think this is a controversial topic for some people. But I definitely, I have faith in God.
Yeah.
That means that word brings up so much for so many, and religion brings up so much for so many. And it's kind of, I know we talked about, okay, like we're not going to politics. I think religion's another one, and that's just often a no-go for people, especially today with the secularization of society. People just, they'd rather rely on human institutions. I'm not necessarily here to tell people what to believe in any way, shape, or form, but I think for me, some of the hardest things I've been through, like that accident, if I thought that that was a mistake or failure, if that's the framing that I gave it, I would be more likely to go into a victim mindset about
Mm.
it, and that doesn't help me. So if you're going into that victim mindset and you're trying to find somebody to save you, I don't think anybody's coming, you know? Like, we've gotta change our perspective, and so for me, what's done that is believing that, you know, nothing's a mistake, nothing's a failure, not everything is for a purpose and a reason, and what helps me do that is having a faith in God or, you know, some power bigger than me that helps me. But, you know, if you don't believe in God or church is really triggering for you or that whole arena, I totally get it. I mean, again, we're not talking about religion. We're talking
Yeah.
about God and a bigger force that governs all things. But if that doesn't resonate, even just saying, okay, is it productive for me to be in the victim mindset, in the I'm a failure, I'm a loser, I make all these mistakes, nothing works out for me? Like, is that mental dialogue helping you? And
Mm.
you know, like we all have the tendency to go to that place, but it's like, okay, when I notice that I'm having negative thinking, when I notice I'm in that place, it's like, okay, I can make a choice.
Yeah.
So what choice do I want to make? And for me, it's way more productive and helps me to believe that, hey, everything's for a reason. What can I learn from this? That's a big question I ask myself.
Ooh.
Um, you know, there's a purpose to everything. This is forming me into the person that I need to be to approach the challenges or the next steps in my life. You know, if I hadn't had the car accident, the book would have been, you know, like if these things
Yeah.
didn't happen, I wouldn't be who I need to be. I wouldn't have the transformation that is meant for me in my life, for who I'm becoming. Back to, right, if you have this vision, well, one step at a time, right? So over the course of your life, it's like if I asked you to map out the next 50 years of your life, it'd be really hard.
Yeah. No.
Like, you know, and what's the longer you're trying to map out, the harder it is to be accurate because there's way more uncertainty with every
Mhm.
minute, with every day, there's more uncertainty. So, you know what I mean? If I ask you map out the next 50 years, whoa. But if I say, okay, the next 15 minutes, like, yeah, I got a grasp on what I'm doing. Okay. The next 15 hours, 15 days, we can kind of manage that. So, I think for me, refocusing my perspective from mistake, failure, wrong, too not on time. This is taking too long, especially with the book. You know, this isn't on the timeline I had. This isn't looking the way I thought. This isn't this the publishers, like every single step of the way. It's like I thought I wanted this. I thought it needed to be like this. Anytime I have this should idea in my head, it's like, no, this is, you know, what can I learn here? What do I want to focus on? I want to focus on things are working out for me. You know, there's something I can learn. There's something I can gain. What do I want? What do I want to change as a result of this, especially when it's challenging, right? I think, and that's what, for all of us, we have these aha moments in our life where something
Mhm.
big happens and it's okay. I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm not going to, like, after my accident, I don't drink alcohol. I don't drink coffee. Like, I changed a lot about my lifestyle. I had to sleep a lot more and be more intentional about sleep, which that's a whole battle in and of itself, I think. Like, what am I going to do as a result of this moment that you're labeling as a failure, but it's an opportunity? So from failures, I think shifting to opportunities and having some faith, if not in a higher power, then at least in yourself to say, no, I can gather something from this. I can learn something from this.
It's ironic that you organically brought up shifting your personal habits because I always say that what we do in our personal life bleeds directly into our professional life. And obviously, you're super successful. You're writing a book. You're here in the States on a whole new journey with entrepreneurship. What's one wellness habit that you come back to each and every single day to center yourself and ground yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. And that word successful, man, we've got to delve into that too, because it's so funny. I thought I was writing a book about being successful and how to be successful, but really it was about finding meaning and fulfillment on a personal level in what you do every day. So I have a funny relationship with the word successful, but thank you. That's nice. It sounds nice to hear. But
When did that, we can come back to my question.
Yeah.
Why was there an event that switched that? I usually ask the question,
yeah.
what does success look like for you? But Why did your
Yeah.
perspective on it switch?
I think because in my mind, it has some sort of external connotation. It's wanting that exact moment that we just had, where you're super successful. You seem, it's this outward. You seem successful. That's just what the word, sort of the connotation it has to me, right? If you're
An
successful, yeah, it's you look successful. It's the people looking in would say you're successful. You feel successful in a superficial or monetary sense. Though it feels very tied closely to money and materialistic success and or achievements as well, which really ties into this perfectionism. Okay, let me like check off things off my list of achievements. It feels more egotistical and superficial. And so really the car accident was that moment where the book was one of those things on the list that you should do to be successful. Hey, you've written a book, you're successful. That's the feeling I get behind that word versus what I really shifted the book to, and what I've shifted that's important to me, which is, hey, you know what? Who cares if anyone thinks you're successful? Are you fulfilled? Do you feel that you're living a life filled with meaning for yourself? Because if you feel fulfillment and you feel that every day I get up, I'm doing meaningful things, they matter. It doesn't matter if you're a stay-at-home mom, you run a bunch of companies, you have a garden. Like it actually, the outer perception of that does not matter if you feel an inner sense of fulfillment. And so back to your question of, okay, well, how do you even navigate that? I think it comes back to, again, time alone. If I don't have, I'm super extroverted. I love to talk. I love to be around people. If I don't give myself time alone every day, I feel like I'm going off course because I'm not listening. It's very easy for me to take on what other people say or think or want and take it into consideration. I think that's good. I think that's really good to get ideas from people and look it through. That's fantastic. But if I'm not on course with my calling, my North Star, what I'm hearing inside, then I run the risk of falling back into the same kind of track that I was on pre-accident, which is following those check marks and achievements and success, whatever that is. I mean, I see it in so many ways, even with starting companies, right? I thought it was the thing I should be doing. And it's like, no, why are we why are we here? Like, what do I actually care about this mission or cause? What do I care about? Why am I'm doing it because it sounds good, which is just, that does not bring fulfillment. Yeah. If anything, it brings resentment and frustration and anger, really. If you get down to it, you're just angry and frustrated a lot of the time. You're doing things just to put on a show. So, yeah, I would say it's changed from that veneer of ego and superficiality and achievement to being of service to people in a way that's bringing me a sense of meaning and fulfillment. And you do that by actually listening. So for me, the biggest tip is making time away from the phone, away from every distraction to hear that voice.
What does fulfillment mean to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the two words get thrown around a lot. A really powerful book for me was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Talks about his experience in Auschwitz and the Nazi camps there. And I think he really touched upon this idea of being very present and finding meaning in the daily life and the small things. And fulfillment for me would be following that voice, following an authentic calling, fulfilling your need to walk toward that calling. There really isn't an end goal until you die, frankly, because you're never done until you're gone. So meaning is what you derive on a daily basis. Fulfillment is walking that authentic path toward what you're being called to do, to create, to be. That's how I distinguish those two.
What's one question that someone can ask themselves that's wanting to find more fulfillment in their lives, to open up their mind to receive?
Yeah, I think you get alone in a room, you get comfy, and you just say, okay, what do I want? What do I need right now? What's the very next step? You know, sometimes, what do I want? What do I need? That feels massive. If you like to, depends on your way of thinking. Some people think top down, other people think bottom up. Okay, I want all my little to-do list tasks and then I'll create the bigger thing. Other people are, no, I have these huge dreams. Bring me back down to what should I do today? So it depends on what kind of thinker you are. You can start from the bottom. Okay, what's the very next step? That's a question there. If you're more of a dreamer, you might even need to ask yourself that same question. Okay, just what's my next step to bring yourself back down to the present moment? So if you want to dream, I would say, what do I want? What do I need? You can ask yourself and sit there with it. And okay, what am I being called toward? What's the bigger thing for me? What's really important to me right now? It's a good question too. Like what's my priority right now? Because that answer is going to change. If you're having kids or you're recently divorced or you're starting a business, what's important to you at different stages. That's another thing with this book. I started writing it in my mid-20s. Now I'm 30. It's 4 years, but I feel like a completely different human. So that changes. So I think what's important to me and what's the very next step are probably those two questions, depending on if you want to hit it from a priorities vision level or from the I feel super uncertain and just want to kind of grab onto the very next moment and get some control.
So you wrote a book over the course, theoretically, of 4 years, and you just alluded to the fact that you've grown so much. After we're going to do post-car accident, what was the initial vision that you had in mind for this book?
Yeah, the initial vision was really, how to be successful, like build a career that makes you successful. This sort of like career coach. It even feels like talking about it feels like, oh, that's so, I don't know. It would have been super like Instagrammable little like things and, like really focused on how can I share about this in a really marketable way and how to be successful would have been like, that was the goal. And defining what is success, how to make a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. This book still looks at, okay, how do you offer your calling to other people? How do you structure that offer? How do you price it? There's still that sort of very granular knowledge and clarification about, okay, bring your idea to the world and make some money. Yes, because money is just the energy that you're bringing in from your efforts. So I'm not vilifying money. It's an important currency to exchange energy. But I think pre-accident, it was that external success, achievement-based, looking good, building a career that you feel proud of from an external gratification standpoint versus building a career you feel proud of because you feel like you're authentically following your heart. You are day after day fulfilled with meaning. You get home at the end of the day and it's like, that was a meaningful day. I had a really good conversation, that to me is a meaningful day when I have powerful conversations so that I can go to bed at night being like, yeah, this was worth it. If if tomorrow doesn't come, like, no, I'm okay. This was a good day. So that was sort of the pre and then post of why am I putting something out into the world and exposing my whole heart and soul for people to judge, which they inevitably will, right? Like we talked about. So why am I doing this to myself? Why am I putting myself out there in such a vulnerable way? It's so that people can pursue a life filled with daily meaning and fulfillment of their calling.
What was the biggest thing that you learned about yourself throughout the book writing process?
Yeah. Give yourself more time. Forever, I've learned that I'm impatient.
Oh, same.
The final chapter of the book is called Patience, and so that was the hardest chapter to write. That was that is everything I've learned since the accident. I feel like my accident recovery. I got married after the accident, so like being in marriage and that requires so much patience. I think that has been such a big shift in me is going from, and I don't get me wrong, I'm still impatient.
Yeah. It's in our nature.
Yeah. It's like so tied to all of these overachiever perfectionism things like that. I better do it on time and like really pressuring myself. And even now, I mean, we're weeks to the launch of the book at the time that we're recording this. And it's like, I definitely am feeling that tendency and that pressure to be like, okay, we needed this done yesterday, but it's going back to, okay, it will release even if it's a few days late. Like, I waited 4 years. If we don't release on the day we set, like, hey, that's okay.
Yeah.
So it's this sort of wrestling with myself on that. And that's the biggest thing I think the book has taught me. The process of writing a book, being with a publisher and an editor and having to go back and forth on the book and seeing how it's evolved and allowing chapters to sort of come to me. Okay, what do I want from this chapter? I can sit down and write it, but clarifying the intention, like I definitely wrote the book in different chunks and then came back
Pieced
and
it together.
Yeah. So, I mean, patience for sure is what has been drawn out of me in this whole process. Definitely. And just in my personal life post-accident of healing and recovery and dating and getting married. And like we got married during the pandemic, which, yeah, I thought that was fine. But a lot of people are like, wow, you did that? I'm like, yeah, we had 2 weddings.
One of my friends did that. Yeah.
Yeah.
She did that, yeah.
I didn't see anything to it. I thought it was great.
What's a pandemic? Gotta do what you gotta.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Hey, I wasn't in your situation, but your whole life was on hold. And so, but when it's something like this, it's such a big turning point in your life. You're like, okay, well, kind of like less of 2 evils. It's like, which one do you do at this point? I mean,
yeah. And hey, everybody's got, like, I've got friends that definitely waited to have that like fairy tale wedding, and they've been beautiful weddings, and I'm so happy for them. And that's awesome if that's that's important to you. I was very back to get in a room by yourself and say, okay, what's important to me about getting married? For me, it was like, there are a certain number of people that I really need in this room and in this church and in this place to witness me taking this step in my life. It's not about Instagram. It's not about having and it was still beautiful. I had a beautiful dress. I had got 2 wedding dresses. I had the beautiful experience. One challenge I'd say was that, okay, my husband's family was all in Switzerland. My family was in Canada. So we did have to have the 2 weddings. So that was, let's say in an ideal world, I would have loved to have everyone together. But both of our families witnessed our love. The people that were important were able to be there for the core people. And that's what was important to me. So back to that question again, it's like, okay, what's important to me? Is it the 500-person fairy tale Instagrammable wedding? That wasn't what was important to me. And I could have, let's say pre-accident, been very pulled toward that. My whole family, all my friends, anybody that I know was pushing for that. Why would you get married now? You can't have all of the people that you want to have. You can't have the big hall. You can't have, it's like, that was a perfect example after the accident to say, this is a big life choice. What's important to me? None of that is important to me. It's important to me to have the right people there. It's important for me to have it in a church, witnessed in a let's say I don't know, I don't know what that word is. Like a sacred environment, witnessed in front of family and friends in community in a sacred place. That was important to me.
Very intimate.
Yeah.
Hey, it's your life. I mean, my mom might kill me for this one, but I always say I would just go to Hawaii and get married and just be, I've never thought about a wedding ring ever in my life. There was one girl that came in here and I really liked hers. Other than that, I don't even look. I've never looked at a wedding dress. Like, I am the opposite. So to your point, like, what's important to me? Mine is more the person that I have to be glued to for the rest of my life. That's the biggest thing that I'm worried about. Everything else, we'll figure that part out. But I'm like I'm the bigger vision. Like, I think very big and then I come down to point. But yeah, no, I'm definitely not a detail oriented. And it's your life. I mean, I always say it's one day in the course of a lifetime. And we kind of alluded to, like, you're not promised tomorrow, but in the same sense, life for the most part is a lot longer. And there are a lot of time. And so it's like, if it's just one small moment in one small day, as long as it's what you loved and then that's all that matters.
Totally. And I resonate with that too, of being in alignment with the person, right? I mean, some women spend 2 years planning, and that's totally cool. Like, or a year planning these events. And if that brings you a sense of fulfillment, that you're walking toward what's important to you, hey, but
Go for
discerning, but it's in that process that we've been, I think, talking about this whole conversation of discerning the difference.
Yeah.
Know the difference. Are you doing this because of you or because of expectation? So I think that's one really big life step that a lot of people, and also you get closer to 30, a lot of people get married because they think they should, period, right? So it's like, okay, I think there's huge value and meaning in the actual sacrament of marriage from a religious perspective in the church and being witnessed and like that whole sort of experience and making a promise, a lifelong promise that's really hard to keep. It's not easy to stay married to somebody that's going to disappoint you, that's going to upset you. That's a big promise and vow that you're making. So being in community, having people watching you make that promise and supporting you in that huge commitment you're making, I think that is a definite step from, yeah, let's see how it goes and we'll just live together. But like, if I don't like you tomorrow, then I'm just out of here, which is a lot. It's not the same level of commitment and promise. So that's the value I see in marriage. And it's very difficult to uphold. I mean, I ask people that have been married for 20, 30, 50 years all the time, like how the heck do you do it? And I think it is in that steadfast decision of like, no, we're in it no matter what. Like that there's no turning back. Because I think if there's a turning back, then, and I mean, it's not without pain and suffering for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what marriage has taught me. And I think that's what the difference in these two is like, okay, am I ready to make this choice internally as something that I'm fulfilling? Do I feel called to fulfill this big vow and promise to another human being, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing how long we have, all of the uncertainty? Am I willing to promise this big commitment, make this big vow to you? Or am I doing it because I want a ring and I'm 30 and I want to have a big day and a nice party and a beautiful dress and like all my friends are doing it, so I should. And we've been dating for 4 years, so we definitely should. It's like, whoa, no. Yeah. I don't care how long you've been dating. Do you want to make that big commitment to that other person? Because it's much harder to pick up the pieces after all of that than to date someone new and find a new dress like that. You know what I mean? Like there's no comparison. So, but the pressure's real for all those superficial things. The pressure's so real.
And it's for anything. And you can take that concept, but I think the biggest point that you alluded to is that there's so much unknown in life, and you can take that relationship, career, whatever it is going on, and you can't let that dictate your actions and the things that you're doing each and every day. And so I feel like the biggest thing that I've learned throughout this entire episode is just that the discernment, are you doing this for you or are you doing it for someone else? And if you're doing something because it's coming from internal and it's something that you want, it's going to lead to something that's much bigger, and it's going to align and fulfill you in a way that you probably didn't seem or didn't think could be possible. And then to the other point of like, if you're just doing this because it's external, and like your book is a great, like you were doing something that was external, and that's probably why it didn't come to fruition, is because it wasn't for the inward motion. It wasn't for what you wanted internally. But now it's like you have this book that's coming to fruition 4 years later, which you probably wanted a lot sooner, but it's coming out in a way that's authentic and true to who you are as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the way to approach everything, as you've said. I mean, there's just no question anything. And I mean, you can see it at work in your own day-to-day life. When you push, when it's I have to, when I should, when it's the experience of it is different and the result is different. When you force things, you use your will to force them. It just feels different while you're doing it, after you're doing it. Even if you achieve the thing, it's kind of even the result is sort of lackluster because I compromised my heart. I put it out there, even if it's successful, but I don't believe in this. It doesn't mean anything to me. Then how you don't feel the same joy and satisfaction from it. You can't. If your heart's behind something, no question. Even if one person reads my book in full, that person's getting me and getting my heart, my soul in that book. No comparison.
For someone that's reading the book, what's the biggest thing that you want them to take out of reading the book? I know it's a big question, but
I think it's just what you sort of summarized. It's plus the value of time, I guess. So, hey, today is really important and it's uncertain. It's everything you said. Today's uncertain. Tomorrow's uncertain. You can't control everything. So make a choice to control your thoughts, the things you can control, and go toward what your heart is saying, because what's the alternative? Waiting, suffering, that victim mindset we talked about, swirling around, and what if it doesn't work? What if I fail?
Yeah.
Like, there are these two tracks I see. It's like, hey, your time is so precious. This life that you have is so precious and you don't know how long you have. Get off of that victim track of talking to yourself like you don't matter or your dreams don't matter. Get out of there and get on a track of going after what you care about. That's what I want people to take away, that they deserve that they can have that they can aim toward that daily. Not every day will go that way. There will be negative thoughts, but it's like point yourself in that direction.
In the direction. Steer the car in that direction.
Yeah. Go that way, because it's a hell of a lot more fulfilling than the alternative.
What's the biggest roadblock that people have when they've turned their cars? So let's say their car is going down towards the direction of fulfillment. What's the biggest obstacle that stops them from getting to where their heart desires that you've seen in your personal experience?
I think what we've been talking about, that need for control. Because so you're in this negative mindset, or you don't believe in yourself, or you're doubting. Okay, no, I want this. I'm going to write the book. I'm going to build the business. I'm going to do the thing. Okay, 3 months later, wait, this is taking longer. I'm not a success yet. 2 years later, hey, I'm still not done. I still didn't pick a publisher. Is anyone going to read this? What am I even doing here? You try to control the outcome so much and the process so much that you feel like you're a failure. You give up, you go back to that path. So I think when you've turned the car, go one step at a time and let it unfold. Make a plan. I mean, for this book launch, I have to have a plan.
Yeah.
But hey, interviews will get canceled, or things might not work out, or it might release a couple days late. Keep the car turned in that direction, even when the things you're controlling or your will is pulling you back to doubt yourself or pulling you back to the other side. I think it's like, once you've turned, keep yourself there is probably the hardest bit, even though it's going to meander, because in those unforeseen turns, it's so easy to go back to like you prove it to yourself. See, I can't do this. I'm not meant to write this or build this or create this. And you look for that confirmation. It's like, no, this is all right. It's a turn. Like, keep going, keep moving in that direction. I think it's the persistence and the willingness to release control of how it happens. It's like, you should know the what and aim toward it, but how that comes to be, hey, that's the adventure. I think that's the adventure. If you knew how things were going to work out, I mean, that would be so boring. We wouldn't want that either. So it's like, okay, wait, no, I like that this is exciting. This is exciting. This is an adventure. I can figure this out one step at a time. So you've turned the car, keep talking yourself into that and let go of your need for some control, because again, how much do we really have?
What's one tactical thing that you do when you catch yourself trying to control or force an outcome? I'm going to use your book as an example. You alluded to a lot of different things coming your way and just things were changing. So what's one thing that you would advise other people to do tactically when they find themselves in this like control, force, overwhelm mindset, to let go and tap back into that intuitive flow energy?
Yeah, I feel like I don't know if this is right or wrong that I keep giving the same answer, but I think it's right. I think it's first you notice. So, hey, okay, like I'm pushing, I'm forcing, I'm in that mode. Not to say you shouldn't take action toward what you want, but it's a feeling of forcing your will. Like, I'm going to make it work. So you have to notice it before you can do anything. And then I think it's removing yourself again. It's okay. Pause, hang on, 5 minutes. Let's take a break. This is like, I'm frustrated. Anything I produce right now is not going to be good or the way I want it to come out. So, whoa. And I've done this so many times, editing the book at 12, editing the book at midnight, 2 a.m., like trying to meet editing deadlines. And it's like, I'm forcing this. Step away, do something completely different, change the environment, and get back into connection with, okay, wait, what's important to me? What's the intention of this chapter or of this particular thing I'm working on? Why am I here? What do I really need to do right now? Like, just start clarifying for yourself away from time pressure. Oh my gosh, time pressure, like urgency feeling, okay, I have this deadline. That's when we get into this, okay,
Frantic.
I'm going to push it through.
Yeah.
It's like, hold on. How many deadlines are, even if you're a bit late, really, like most of the time you're going to be fine. Even if you miss a deadline, we can definitely look at, okay, how can you maybe work on it a bit sooner and not procrastinate to the end?
Yeah.
But, you know, nothing is as most things are not as urgent as they seem. So definitely taking a step back, being alone, reconnecting. Hey, you know, is this how I want to approach this? Like checking in with myself. Is this what I really want? And if the answer is no, and I can either postpone it if I'm really not into it, or sit back down after a break a bit more aligned, I think that's like the first step is noticing that you're doing it. Because it's such an easy, I mean, for me, it's such an easy pattern of, no, I got to get these things done. I don't care what it takes. I won't eat. I won't sleep. I'll just push.
Yeah. Never ends well.
Yeah. No, like physically, mentally, the whole thing just starts breaking down. So definitely the first step is noticing it and practicing noticing it, because you'll repeat it. I mean, it's a pattern of overachieving or whatever you call it. I don't know what that is, but yeah, maybe trying to overachieve, or being unrealistic or pushing yourself beyond. Yeah. And I think when you're coming from that place of fulfillment as well, you can do a lot more, because you're not, the pushing energy is so much more effort. When things, when you allow, like it's also kind of a masculine, feminine energy question. Yes. Like when you allow things, yeah, when you kind of put your stake in the ground, okay, this is what I want to create, this book, and you allow the ideas and you allow the writing. I've had moments of writing where it pours out of me in a way, like I don't even know who's writing. It's not even me writing it. I feel like I'm just, these ideas are coming to me. And then there are times where it's like, okay, I have to write this last paragraph. Completely different book that comes out of you, and it's like, I must sit down and write this. Now, yes, structure is important. So you got to sit down and write. But I think clarifying, okay, my intention is to write this chapter, being clear in your intent, and then allowing the ideas and the next steps and the actions to come to you is definitely a more feminine approach. And I think, especially for women, actually, because a lot of things are more masculine. You know, schedule, do it, doesn't matter. Just get it done, and pushing and a bit more forceful, and go out and seek the thing, get the thing. I think for men and women, there's just a need to balance a bit of both. Yes, first set your intention, know what you're looking for, then go out and you'll see what you're looking for in the world, and you can go and get it. Not going out and trying and pushing and forcing without that first clarity. So I think that's what it is. It's go be alone. Get yourself, not, you could be, again, a man, it's just energies, but go out, be by yourself, get that clarity of intention. What are you looking for? What are you wanting? And then go out and act out in that masculine fashion. So I think it's sort of it's not either or, it's more like a first and then second step that I think if I'm just in the doing side of things and forcing and pushing, feels like I'm rolling a rock up a hill, which is like, well, hang on, why don't we put it at the top and let it roll down? Kind of like, let's find a way to make it easier, if that makes sense.
And I think your book, I was going to relate it to a house, but since we're on the book topic, I think the content is what makes the book, and that's the creative, that's the feminine energy. The actual structure, the pages, the actual action and everything of the book is the masculine. So I think if you think about it that way for the audience, like when you have this creative dream or this vision, or like for me, it was a podcast, it's like, okay, so that was coming from the feminine, and my guest and a lot of stuff is like more intuitive or things that flow to me, but the actual action that I have to take is more masculine. And it's a hard balance sometimes, because I have in my past leaned more more masculine. Like I'm very much of a doer, get things done. Now, like that's just more my personality. I think a lot of it has to do with how I was raised, but I started to see a real shift when I tapped more into that feminine and like allowed things to flow through through me more, because it created more opportunities in a way that I didn't think was possible, because I wasn't being so rigid and so structured. And so there is a fine balance. And I also think it's where you're at. So like there's probably times where you had to be more masculine with the book. Like I need to be more structured. I need to do this. And then there's times where you could tap into that creativeness, if you will. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that whole process starts with the awareness of how am I being?
Yeah.
Same thing with the mindset of, okay, am I in the negative and victim, or am I in the possibility mind? Like it's the first step of all of this is awareness, which is why the advice I keep giving is go be by yourself so that you can like think about some of this stuff
We're doing a meditation challenge right now. So this is literally exactly it. Like stillness is key. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's so many other things that can impact our thinking. So absolutely. I think that getting alone, noticing it, and then deciding, okay, what is it for this season or for this project or for this task at hand? Is it a more masculine or is it a more feminine? Like that's a great distinction to make, because definitely in school or in the workplace, I think a lot of it is very focused on the masculine. And when we ask ourselves, okay, but how can I make this easier? A lot of the time, making things easier means using the feminine side, because it's less about force and more about intent and then observing. And like you said, you see more opportunities.
Yeah.
But you see with that intuition, it's like then you start seeing, okay, what could I do? And then you know out of those 10 options, okay, no, I'm going to pursue these two. Your direction, your actions are actually more impactful because you took the time to think and intuit and feel about, okay, what do I want? What's my intent? What are the options? Which ones are best for me? Then act. And I think a lot of us are living our lives putting out fires every day. You know, what's burning? What's the most urgent task? What must I complete right now? And so living from that place of urgency and just trying to put out fires is way less effective than sitting back, surveying the landscape, and then making our choice. So I think that's really important. But it's so easy to live in that urgency of have to do this now. It's almost exhilarating, but that's I think where burnout really comes from too, is constantly living in that state of burning out, putting out fires and needing to complete things on some preordained schedule. I think that's where burnout really comes from.
And stillness is, I think, pushing is a very reactive. So it's like, I have to do this, versus stillness gives you the option to be proactive. So how can I be proactive to approach things? And that's the biggest thing that meditation, stillness, visualization has really taught me, is that I take a more proactive approach to my day instead of having things being thrown at me. Because when you're in that stillness, you can feel, and it's like you know what you need to do. It's not those to do, they're always going to be there, but it gives you the space to be creative of like, how are you going to get there? And it's also going to bring up things that you didn't think about previously that are going to your point, get you to your goal a little bit faster had you not been in that. So I think that's another thing that I always like to tell people is like one's more reactive and one's more proactive towards a goal.
Totally. And I really like that you brought up meditation is one that it's sort of like God. People have this idea of it. And so I move away from the word, but as a practice, I think definitely meditation is focusing on your breath or a specific thing in order to create that stillness and that awareness for things to come to you and then letting them go. And it depends what your intention of your meditation is. But I feel like that word, people have this idea and, oh, I'm not good at it, or I can't, like it's this funny word. So I try to shy away from it because what people think of it, but definitely. And then visualization is another one, huge in coaching and absolutely massive for clarifying. So definitely it's in the book. It's something I use with clients and you can do on your own for sure. And it's in those questions of, okay, what do I want, or what's important to me? You start seeing pictures and images and even feelings or ideas in your mind. And that's what visualizing is, right? It's imagine in your mind before it's real, right? So if you have it
Manifestation.
clear, well, yeah. And so the same point A, point B, if you're as clear as you can be on your point B, so much easier to then get there. Even if it's just like you said for your day. Okay, what do I want for my day? You just sit there for a second. Okay, what do I want out of this day? What are the most important things? You visualize yourself going through the day. Does it mean it's all going to go to plan? No, but it means that you know what you're looking out for throughout the day and the feeling you want to bring to it and your intention. Like for me, bringing authenticity to this podcast was is and was my intention whenever I'm sharing in a public way, because I know it's so easy for me to do the veneered polish thing, to do the what should I say, what do they want to hear thing. That's so easy for me to do that. I don't know, like it's like almost a skill that you have to put it on, like put on that show of your persona, whatever that even is. And it's like, so for me coming into this today, it's like, okay, authenticity. Okay, I shouldn't say that I was started out writing the book out of ego, but that's what it was. And I learned so much because
but people connect to that. Authenticity is what everyone connects to.
I mean, yeah, because it's real.
Yeah.
But if you can't even, so the intention allows you to be real with yourself so that you can go forth in the world, be in the world in that way. So it's like, you've got to get yourself in a row, like you've said. You've got to get your own ducks in a row, be clear, and then you can go out and have your day and do your thing and be that person. So, I mean, for me, it's completely about clarifying intention by visualizing what it is that I want. Absolutely. So that when I'm in this real moment, I've already thought about what I want this to be like. I've already thought about the feeling I want to create, about the way I want to answer questions, about what matters to me that to share. So I'm not here just rattling off a set of answers for you or coming from my head. This is
from your heart.
So yeah.
Where can people find your heart and soul that is now into the universe? Pimp yourself out. I'm going to let you do the honors and give everyone the name of your book and where they can find you. And I'm going to put all this in the show notes, but have at it.
Yeah. So it's called Memorable, and the subtitle is Lessons to Leave a Legacy. So you can find that pretty much anywhere that people sell books, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, etc. And anything online is just my name. So Kalyna Miletic, and that'll be linked in the places. So yeah, you can find me by my name pretty much anywhere online. And then the book is called Memorable.
Well, thank you so much for being on. This podcast was incredible. I feel like I learned so many things, and I love when we go spiritual. That's one of my favorite topics. But the last question I ask every single person is, Kalyna, what are you grateful for today?
That's a very good question. There's so many things. There's actually an exercise in a book to cultivate gratitude. So it's bringing that to mind.
You can give more than one. I write down like 7 every day. So we might be one and the same.
Yeah. I think I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share from my heart and have people hear it and have people interested in listening to it. I'm so grateful that I have this opportunity to share from my heart, and that it hopefully impacts, I mean, even just you, right? That I'm able to share what's on my heart and have it be heard. I'm so grateful that there's a forum for that for me, and that people want to hear it. I feel very lucky to have that opportunity. Amazing.
Her energy is very genuine. You can hear it through your earphones wherever you are listening, or if you're watching this. And I am grateful for this podcast. I've said this one before. I always write down 1 million, but I feel like just the people that I've met throughout this entire process and the relationships that I've cultivated and the people that I've met have inspired me in many ways. So thank you so much for being on. You are amazing.